Yeah, Mikhail just reminded me that we'll be sending out survey after the event, and we would appreciate if everyone could fill out the survey, share suggestions with us on how to make the event better. Tell us if you like the event and would be interested in visiting again and attending again, as well as any other feedback you may have. Okay, I see the panelists here, so I'm assuming they're getting ready to start.
Hello, everybody. Okay, great. It's what time now? Okay, no, you can't leave. We have to stay for the mixer. But we're gonna just jump right into something that we all think is critically important. My name is Rokia Jones. The panelists, come on up to the stage. I work here at Microsoft, been here for about 1.5 years now, and now in a new role where I'm leading the 5G strategy on our edge connectivity platform, or not platform, our edge connectivity network. And I work with Yusuf, Khalidi, and also Albert, and every other brilliant mind that's in this room that's a part of Microsoft's networking team. So I kind of wanted to just kind of break the ice and just talk about something that's really been important to me. And it's really about like thinking, when we talk about, you know, design principles and how do we build for the future, we also want to make sure that we are including everyone in our builds, that we're trying to make sophisticated design strategies that will not only service the majorities, but also the minorities all around the world. So this is a big topic that a lot of companies are discussing at this time. Without further ado, I want to introduce some of my amazing panelists. We'll go from the left to right, my left, your right. We have Laura. She's also with Microsoft, and I'll allow her to introduce herself, and then Rahel will say a couple words, Mariah, and then Billy will say a couple words. So take it off, Laura, and introduce yourself.
So I'm Laura, am I on? Yep, there we go. I'm Laura Rebelki. I'm a software engineering manager out of our organization in Microsoft called CSC. I manage a team of engineers that do customer-facing engagements that drive improvements back into our cloud services, as well as provide best practices and reference architectures out to the rest of our customer communities.
Next we have up Rahel Ephraim.
Hi. Hi, my name is Rahel Ephraim. I am a principal software engineer manager for Graph API team in Identity, and I lead 9 engineers. Graph API is a platform that allows as a gateway for everyone to access cloud environment.
Thank you. Mariah?
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Mariah Cowling. I am a software engineer, and I work in Mixed Reality Studios.
Hi, everyone. I'm Billy Anders. I'm the general manager for the Azure Engineering CXP team. So my team engages directly with customers. So you think about networking, storage, compute, all the great services that Azure actually builds. Well, you know, customers actually need help oftentimes getting onto those services to build their workloads. So my team engages with them, you know, deal sign, pre-sales, all the way through getting them into run state through production. And then we also drive strategy around supporting those customers long-term through the entire customer lifecycle.
That's great. So as you can see, we have a collection of superstars that are all working in different capacities around the company, but all focused on engineering principles and different aspects of the business that really helps us all accelerate what we do. You know, this topic that I want to talk about today was really about culture, and what makes a really great culture, in my opinion, is one that encourages us to balance like time, designing of products, technical debt, improving our test coverage, and ultimately learning from others and different peers in all different groups. Now, there's also this notion of a poor engineering culture, and those are the ones we want to stay away from, and I'm sure nobody in this room practices this, but those are when we are ignoring the future of short-term gains, and we treat employees as if they're cogs in a machine instead of like people. In this panel, we'll dive into a real talk where we'll really kind of uncover and talk about some of their experiences as it relates to design, and we'll collectively like utilize some of the practices that they use to not only as a design platform, but also as a way to build creative, diverse engineering teams through hiring and whatnot. So panelists, so I've asked them today to really kind of, peel back the corporate shield and like really just talk about, let's keep it real around, when we talk about, and I guess, I don't know who's gonna go first, but my first question is around, how do you feel the industry, the engineering industry specifically, has evolved or changed over the last, maybe let's say last 24 months?
The whole engineering industry, how it's changed?
Yes, how, from a diverse perspective, like have you seen improvements? Are there still challenges? How do you see it changing in a way that's in support of growing our diversity?
I personally have experienced a larger influx of younger people who are diverse coming into the industry. I have a very large team, and our organization is very large. We have a number of people that work across all of our Azure services and a lot of different types of workloads. So we're bringing in a lot of new talent, and I have seen a large influx of diverse talent coming in that is young. I haven't, unfortunately, seen a big change in the number of diverse candidates that are coming in that have more experience, but definitely a larger population that's young, and that's exciting.
That's great. Anybody else? Any changes that you'd like to highlight that you've seen? Billy, how
No,
long? You've been in the business for a long
so
time.
I just, I'm trying to make sure. So I have seen more focus and concentration and energy around our definition of diversity and doing what we can. And I'm not just speaking about Azure or Microsoft or whatnot. I'm speaking larger across the tech industry on creating I'll call it the pipelines in for diversity. And again, I'm going across the ethnic and racial, gender equality, the full spectrum, people with different abilities, autism spectrum, et cetera. So I've seen that energy there. I have not seen a great deal of strides being made, oftentimes outside of certain pockets. I think we've done really well with women, particularly Asian and white women in engineering. I think other groups could use leveraging those patterns and practices and that energy that the women have made into those other groups in order to create that same type of those same gains that they've had. From an inclusion perspective, because the pipeline is actually the actual easier problem if you were to ever ask me, getting more people into the organization. It's actually once they have landed in the organization, what is it that you do to make so that they feel included, that they can bring their best and their A game into the group. And I think that teams in pockets have done really good work in trying to create those inclusive environments. But I think it's such a hard thing that larger organizations are still struggling with it. And if you look at the numbers across the industry, there haven't been a great deal of gains in the representation numbers when it comes to D&I and things like that. So I think there's a lot more to be done there. But again, I do want to go back to the early statement of saying I see the energy, I see the intent. I think everyone is just struggling with how to actually do it, and that's where the problem lies at this point.
Well, that's a great segue, and thank you for sharing and being real, because that's what this is about. I think until we're comfortable being uncomfortable and talking about the things that we're struggling in, we can't grow. It's just like in design, if you're not going to talk about the ways that you develop something new and how it did not fit for a certain caliber of person, whatever diverse category they're in, you find yourself, actually going back to the drawing board and starting over. So that leads me into my next question. And we've purposely on this panel, we've included Mariah. She's one of what we call a millennial engineer that comes with great new energy, excitement, and a new, just refreshing aspect for the way we do business. We also have Rahel, who's now been in the company for about 4 months now, came from Intel. So shout out to Intel. Thank you for being here. I want to pose the question to these two ladies. What is it like and what has it been like with your onboarding and your training being that you're a diverse engineer talent. Has that been good? How do you think we can do that better? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, so some ways that it's been really helpful during my onboarding process is that I was immediately paired with a team member who was my engineering mentor, and he kind of helped me to on-ramp throughout the process. He was kind of available whenever I had questions, and he made it a much easier onboarding process. Some of the things that were difficult, however, is the ambiguity. And ambiguity is fun for creativity, but not when you join a brand new team and don't know what they're working on and don't know where the documents are, things aren't documented. That's a different type of ambiguity. And I think just having more clear structure for people when they're onboarding, where you have maybe an onboarding timeline of things that you'll like for them to do, and that way they can assess their skills and see what things that they don't know and things that they need to acquire. And then they also can realize, okay, I can leverage these skills that I currently have and use those during my onboarding process to make it a more enjoyable experience for everyone. So that's just my personal experience so far.
Oh, that's great. How about you, Rahel?
Okay, for me, I've been in a software world for a while, which is 15 years of experience. So coming to Microsoft was not a surprise to me because I went through a lot of companies and I have my own expectation. So in a software world, guys are more dominant, and you're always gonna feel like unfitted at the beginning, and you feel kind of left out. But over time, you kind of adapt it, and it becomes your norm. For younger engineers, what I always advise is that stop looking, sex or race, or just try to be part of a team, part of a group, instead of part of what is the differences that create in you. So onboarding at Microsoft was not difficult to me because I onboarded to different companies in the past. And also, I think I am very fortunate. I joined a group who were very supportive, and I was able to navigate easily. But I can see a lot of engineers can go through that process as a manager. I try to enable them and pair them with other engineers across my team or outside my team so that they don't feel like left out.
Yeah, so what we hear here is that pairing is important, mentorship is important. And when when we're trying to do business with our customers, we're always trying to find those friendly customers because those are the customers that are kind of easy to work with. For me, as I've onboarded to different teams, I've always kind of tended to find someone that's considered SME, but also that one that is friendly enough that will help educate me. Because in every role, you have to grow. And that's the same for anyone, whether you are male or female, whether you're of color or not. We all have the same abilities, but we all have different learning curves. And I think in engineering, sometimes that gets forgotten about. So I want to ask our two managers here, senior leaders here, to give some aspect of or some insights to around are there best practices that you use when you're onboarding new engineers that helps them maybe shorten that upskilling time, especially when they're not maybe as experienced as some others?
Yes.
Can you share what you do? Or?
Well, you said keep it real, so here's my
Keep it real, please.
I have a welcome speech, and it starts with, welcome to Microsoft, we're all crazy. And I'm not lying. And people do refer this back to me, and I explain that you're going to want to quit about 10 times the first year, right? And you're going to think this is the best place you ever worked just about as many times. And I always encourage people, give it a year. go through the cycle, and just give it a year, and you do team people up with other SMEs, with other mentors. You find somebody that can be there to help guide them through that first year. But in a company like Microsoft, that first year is challenging. You're learning a whole new language on top of this culture, and we are all crazy. And after a year, you start to embrace the crazy and realize it's a good crazy. It's fun. So it is all about helping make sure that you get them teamed up with somebody that can help them through that. In addition, keeping a regular pulse with that person or with those people is also important. We set up lunches throughout the year for the new people so that they can all get to know one another, embrace the crazy together as they learn. So those are a few things that we do.
That's great. How about you, Billy?
So a couple of things that we do in our team is that we have an official kind of onboarding process where we definitely send them through the new employee orientation. That's a Microsoft-wide thing. We get them signed up with Azure Bootcamp. And then my team, since my team actually the ones that work with customers and kind of teaches them the platform so that they can onboard, we've actually used that engine to actually teach our engineers within the CXP team so that they kind of get onboarded to understand the technology as well. On a kind of more human, personal side, we clearly have them paired up with a mentor, but I found the buddy program that we've been doing to be very beneficial as well. I actually have a new employee in the audience. I don't see Rachel back there and whatnot.
Hi.
And so when you bring the new employee on, you have a buddy. It isn't necessarily a mentor. They could be peers. The person could actually technically be more junior and whatnot, just so that the employee has someone to be able to go to with quote unquote dumb questions and feel really comfortable. Because there's so much information, the systems, like how do we do things just, from a culture perspective, helps out a great deal. So those are some of the things that we actually do. And then of course we do the check-ins with connects and things like that, but that's more the structure that's been provided by the larger organization. And then me personally, if I know the person, I do try to reach out and see how they're doing and whatnot. I actually do even more so with women's groups and ethnic and racial minorities and whatnot to make sure that they're plugged into the ERG groups. Like if you were here at Microsoft, you would learn about Blacks at Microsoft as an example. So, there's questions that come up that if you're new to a company, new to a city, new to tech or whatever it may be, that you wouldn't think a person would ask. And the canonical example that I use is when a Black woman from outside of the area moves into the Seattle area, one of the first things that many will ask is, where do I get my hair done? And if clearly that's not a problem for Billy, but with that as a question that is asked. And again, it could be all women maybe asking, but that's one because they don't know where the Black community is or where to get hair done. And so I've had my brothers and sisters that are not Black just reach out to me and say, hey, where does Tony get her hair done and stuff like that, and I just connect them, and that goes such a long way because when you connect them to that community, not only do they get their hair done, they find out where that community is, whatnot. They now know the church that people go to, and so that is so super important beyond just the Microsoft part, because a lot of times people will say, I understand my job, I'm doing okay, but when I leave work, like that, I want to be able to relax and be in an environment. And the Pacific Northwest is very different than the Bay Area and Atlanta and all these different places. And so you do need to do a little bit more with these different communities so that they feel welcome, not just in your group, not just at Microsoft, but in the larger community. And so you got to do a little bit more.
That's a great call up because a lot of people do relocate, and relocation is what you call it is really key.
Yeah, that's great. I think all of the leaders here that's represented today, Google, Facebook, Intel, Broadcom, they all face some of these same challenges, and that's kind of why we had this conversation at this forum, was because we are all struggling with trying to find more creative, innovative minds, and that comes in all shapes, different shapes, sizes, and what we want to do is try to figure out how can we get more of that in here? How can we change those perspectives? And so it leads me to my last question, and this is a big one, is when we talk about new designs, I would like to know When you've been at Microsoft and you've maybe been here a long time, or you're not an industry hire, it could be difficult to maybe comprehend other perspectives that are not Microsoft perspectives in this case, because everybody here is Microsoft. But this same question would apply, and maybe ask yourselves or your teams later, if you're at Facebook, or if you're at Google and you're trying to do, or Stanford, if you're trying to do something different and you want to bring in different perspectives, what do you all do to go gather those different perspectives? Because if we don't have different perspectives, different design tactics or techniques or principles, it really can affect how innovative we truly are, because all we're doing all day is sitting in a room, in a building, and all we see is the same people that we see every single day, and we're relying on those new employees that come in just to gather, hey, what do you know? Where'd you come from? And sometimes we might not even ask, because we're the engineers and we know everything. So not that that would be any of you all, but I'm interested to understand with our busy schedules, how do you all find time to gather those different perspectives, either to influence your teams, inspire your teams, and really push them further to think a little bit deeper?
I can take this one. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I came from open source technology to Microsoft Stack, and I think one of the balance that everyone should consider or think is there is a Microsoft way of doing things, and also there is open source way of things. And how do you find a balance for that continue to be a challenge, especially for newcomers? So there are some members you work with who were at Microsoft only and wanted to continue to do that. And there are people who has wider experiences and they wanted to integrate that. And the research that is being invested to any design, including what is a third-party open source technology can help us with the Microsoft product that we already have. We should continue to do a proof of concepts work that says, yeah, Microsoft has this product, but also there are some other products we can consider and see what we can do better. So in my team, I always encourage to do proof of concept work previous of any development work we do. And we have a meeting that that's called Design Spec Review Day. And everyone in my engineers get to participate and give a feedback. And after that feedback, we vote which product we wanted to implement and bring it in. So this idea was proposed by me, and we participated.
Great, I love that. Love that. Anybody else want to share? Yeah.
So for me, what I try to do to make sure that we're getting all perspectives, we're getting a variety of opinions that help to enforce our technologies, I try to leverage social media and see what people are saying just out, like our customers, what are our customers saying? And I may make I don't have the biggest social media following or anything. However, when I do make a post and I inquire something like, how do you all feel about mixed reality or something like that, I'm really surprised at the plethora of responses that I get. And then I take some of those ideas back to my team and I share, hey, I've realized that a lot of people really want to see this, or a lot of people in my group of friends really appreciate this. And just as an example, one of our last projects we were working on, we got to the point where we were like, we need someone to record and narrate our application. We need a narrator. And typically the narrators are white Americans and of all of our applications. And so me as the only Black person in the room, I was a little nervous to say my opinion. However, I just suggested, can we possibly have someone else narrate the application? Just because since we're a global organization, can't we just have global representation, at least in one of our apps? I'm not asking for all of them, but just one of them. And there was it was dead silence. And you could hear a pin drop on the table. And then everyone was like, yeah, why not? Like, why haven't we tried to get like a different representation, you know? And being that through like your mixed reality experiences, the voice is very important to assist with the application, and you feel personally connected to the speaker even though you can't see them. And so I was just suggesting, and I commonly provide these types of suggestions, okay, if we're going to try to make sure that everyone feels like this technology is for them, then let's try to represent them so that they feel like they're a part of it and they'll be more inclined to use it. And when I told some of my friends about this, they were like, I can't wait to use that application. And they're just like, I can't wait to hear just variety or diversity and just what's represented. Another example that I'll say very quickly is that some of the benefits I've found directly to having diverse teams is that instead of making assumptions where you're like, I think women would like this, and it's a group of men around a table, and they're like, I really think women like this. It's much easier when you just invite the woman into the room and you're like, what do you think about this? And of course, she can't speak for every woman in the world. However, it does really broaden your perspective very quickly. And one of my team members was designing an animated film, and he wanted to really align with Microsoft's inclusive design principles. And so he designed a Black family. And he was trying to get my feedback to understand how should I best represent them. And it was a really nice conversation because he was really nervous to ask me at first. He was like, I don't want her to be offended, but I need her opinion to make it inclusive. And I was actually honored that he asked for my feedback. And once we got over that like hurdle of nervousness, it was just a really nice experience. And I was able to share with him, well, you know, maybe in the 80s, you know, Black men wore like these really long sideburns and like, you know, but nowadays they don't really wear those anymore, you know? And so he was able to, you know, iterate on his design and make it more relevant to at least like 2018 Black culture, which is really important when you're representing a group of people, you know, just in terms of correctly representing them and aligning with but you know, what's currently modern day. So those are just some of the ways that I've tried to make sure we're getting a diverse set of opinions and also just leveraging my own voice to make sure we're really implementing a variety of technologies that appeal to everyone.
That's critically important. I think she really just hit a lot of things that are very simple things for us to do, but sometimes we don't maybe necessarily take that time to do it because we're iterating and we're just trying to get through it and we're trying to move fast and we're trying to get it out the door. But, you know, taking those moments and just bringing someone else in, it just really changes the whole dynamics of the team, changes the whole dynamics of the design even, because now it takes on a new life. It takes on a new outcome. You know, so I really appreciate you sharing that. That was really, really great. Billy, Laura, you have anything to add on this one?
I think we both do customer-facing teams. We both have engineering teams that work with customers, right? So, you know, it's a little different because we are constantly working with a diverse group of opinions because our customers are all coming with the diverse set of requirements. And so as a customer-facing team, we're kind of already trained to listen first and gather requirements, gather what they're truly trying to solve for before you start designing anything. So I don't know if you've had any specific experiences, but you know, that's just the way I think we probably naturally work.
Yeah, one concrete thing that you can do on just diversity, we invite people into the meeting, the table, and everybody's expressing themselves or like that, is one of the things that I do is, unless it's like really has to get done right now, you know, survey, critical case, is if it's something that we can take time on, is I do ask everyone that, hey, everyone that didn't, you know, that has something more to add, you know, let's time box this and, you know, shoot me a mail or stop by my office and whatnot, so that you can make sure that you're getting all of the feedback in the room. If you think about any typical conference or meeting, you know, you'll have probably, you know, 20% of the room dominating 80% of the time.
Yeah.
And so that's the culture that we have. And I don't know if it's specific to tech. I've just been in tech for, you know, 23 years, and so therefore it's what I know best. But I'm assuming it's similar in other places. We call it the type A personality.
Yeah.
And so you want people that are just as bright, if not brighter, that are a little bit more, that might want to take and think about things a little bit longer, but still want to express themselves. Give them their channel into the decision. And so 20% of the people spoke up, drove it in. You think you've landed on a decision like that, you know, make sure you as the leader, and leader isn't just the manager, the person that's driving this conversation, you know, says, okay, great, we have a couple of options here and stuff like that. Anyone else that thinks they have something to add, stop by my office, shoot me a mail or whatever it may be, because people communicate in very different ways.
That's right.
Like I write, you know, like that, right? It takes a little bit longer and whatnot. And some people, you know, are, you know, just quicker, you know, right there in the meeting. So if you want to do something very concrete, and again, it's not, you know, cite down, got to go jump on it right now, give everyone an opportunity to include themselves into the decision by opening up those other channels.
I like that. You know, like on my old team, when I was at Verizon, because I was at Verizon before Microsoft, one thing that I did was I always liked those customer service boxes when you go to a restaurant and you have the customer service box, because I don't want to offend the waitress or the waiter. I would always drop my comment there because I was too just, you know, I didn't want to offend anybody. But what I started doing was I put a box on the outside of my office where it was called the innovation box. And so we had a chat session, a design session, and someone wanted to say something, but hey, somebody might be in the room that if I disagree with you, it's gonna cause problems. So I don't wanna really say it, I don't wanna speak up in the room. Then you can, to Billy's point, drop it in that box and give me that idea, because one thing I don't wanna do is I don't wanna lose the knowledge that comes out of a session like that just because of a personality type mismatch in the room. So I think when we're doing these design sessions and we're gathering that information, making sure that everybody has an opportunity to speak is critically important. And that really speaks to really what we talk about when we say diversity. Diversity of not only color, gender, all these things, but diversity of thought. Being able and free to express yourself without being judged. You know, this is one of the things that we have to deal with in our daily jobs at some companies.
I would want to call out on the flip side, because I have had a lot of people come to me and ask me, how do you deal with the situation where you are in the room and the 20% or that one person or the two people? Happens a lot within some meetings where you're not given the opportunity to use your voice, and there isn't a space. And on the flip side, you know, I do encourage people to use the alternate methods of communication, to, you know, send the email afterwards, you know, make sure that your voice is being heard. You can't always interrupt, and if you don't want to change who you are and become that person that's interrupting everybody else in the meeting, I hear people saying they don't want to become that. And so just finding other ways that they can share their opinion, share their voice, and make sure that we're thinking clearly about this, and it's not just who's ever loudest in the room.
That's right. I even awarded the people that would send good ideas and drop it in that box. I would even award them some type of way and thank them, sending some type of just thank you for giving us that insight. Mariah?
And I'll just add, one thing I think that leaders can do in those situations and meetings is pull those people into the conversation, because it's really important for other people to hear their ideas as well, because then that could catalyze more ideas, and it can be a domino effect of ideas. So I think as a leader of these groups, it could be really helpful to see that someone hasn't really said anything in the meeting, and just politely putting them on the spot. Hey, do you have anything to share? I know you have a lot of great ideas, and encouraging that person through that. And that way, we could have more of a culture where people aren't dominating the conversation, and we can begin to change that.
Right.
Because it's something that it's important to hear everyone's opinion. That's why everybody's here,
That's right.
Yeah, I think I wanted to add one more thing in here. In software engineering, it's known men are dominant, and it is known women get to stay quiet. It is up to the leaders actually to encourage those women to speak up and as well as to participate in a design or in any discussion. We could encourage them to come to our office or send us emails, but people also get left out with that. If we just say, communicate with me with anything you want, then they feel like they will never be in the team. So encourage them to speak up, encourage them to be part of a conversation is the very important part I wanted to
Great.
mention.
If I can add, I just want a little bit of caveat there, is that you want to create the space for everyone to be able to engage in a project, in a meeting, and things like that. But there's a fine balance between creating the space, making the right eye contact with a person, see if she or he, because it's not just females that want to engage in this discussion in this way, than me saying, Jan, you got something to say? Like that. And so there's a fine balance there of creating the space, like that. If you have a relationship, making the eye contact and stuff like that. If she's giving you something in your ear and it's a great idea, if anybody has anything they want to say, I've gotten some great ideas recently like that. And that space there, and then it's like, oh, I have something to say, great, like that. But I would be cautious on the, calling anyone out. You clearly wouldn't do it aggressively, because that may not be the way in which they did it. And if they've endeared themselves to you hey, this is my style here. This is how I engage.
Don't want to change who you are.
Don't make them change and conform to what is it they don't want to be. Now, if they said, hey, I want to be more aggressive, I want to be like that, then, yes.
Help them along.
Exactly. Help them out and stuff like that. But just be careful there, because we engage and bring people into the organization, into different companies, because of their unique abilities. And because of the way they engage and their perspectives and their background and things like that.
Right.
And it's a really bad thing if you say, come in, now conform. Like that. You really want them to come in and be their best selves. And we're our best selves when we are ourselves, just as we are, and things like that. We all have to follow rules and things like that. But if I'm a quiet person and I can contribute in this way, allow me to be a quiet person, like that. Now, if I say I want to be a little bit more aggressive, then that's part of my development plan with you now. And then help me do that by, throwing me up on the stage or whatever it may be.
Helping them find a way to have their voice heard.
Exactly.
That's right. So just be yourself and live your best life. And, as we look at all the users that are coming online, all the users that are going to be coming in the future as we launch 5G, which I'm totally in support of, the customers' expectations are changing. And so our design principles and the way that we evolve has to change as well. And so there's ways that we can do this. And hopefully today this has been an insightful panel that gives you an idea of like some things that maybe you can just try to start incorporating into your daily jobs. And if you're leaders, don't be afraid to bring in some different people, bring in some different people from other countries, because that's the way that they also can get new perspectives around design principles. And ultimately, what has been shared, I think, are valid ways that we can really be more purposeful and intentional around creating a greater engineering culture that's more efficient, that creates more products, and ultimately one that promotes high retention in all types of talented engineering roles. So I thank you all for your time today.